Hi, in this lesson, you'll learn how to traverse vectors. Recall in an earlier lesson, you were introduced to vectors. Vectors are a data structure that allows you to hold more than one value in a single variable. In this lesson, you're going to explore how to traverse through a vector to see all of its values. Looping through a vector will give you access to all the elements in the vector one by one. In this lesson, you're going to explore two different ways to do that. One is called a for loop and the other is called a for each loop. Let's look first at the for loop. Using the size function, you can create a standard loop using a loop variable. Inside the loop, you will use that loop variable to access the values of the vector via their index. Each time through the loop, notice that the loop variable I increases by 1, allowing you to access the next element in the vector. When this program prints, it adds 1 to the value so that the labels start at 1 instead of 0. Using the loop gives you access to the loop variable, which is essentially a counter to tell you which element you're currently processing. Sometimes it's important to have this variable. In contrast, the for each loop allows you to access all values without a counter variable. Notice that this type of loop is called a for each loop, but the syntax still only uses the keyword for. Instead of using a loop variable to access the elements via the index, the for each loop creates a new variable, in this case, the string variable letter. As the program loops through the vector, the loop variable takes on the value in each element. The first time through, the letter is equal to k. Inside the loop block, you use that variable just like any other. There is no need to reference an index value. As the loop progresses, the variable takes on a new value. One by one, you iterate through the list until you finally get to the last letter. Once you are through all the letters, the loop is complete and the program continues. The big advantage to the for each loop is that it's easier to read in code. However, if you need the counter variable for other purposes, then it's often better to use a traditional loop. Now that you know how to loop through values in a vector, you can use them in your program. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple different loops to loop through our vector. So we have a basic vector here with classes, so this is schedule out. Now we're going to use a for loop to start here. So notice that my for loop starts at 0 and goes to less than class size. Remember, class size is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 classes. And so this goes from 0 to less than 6, which is going to be 0 to 5, and those are our index values for this vector. Now I'm going to add 1 here to my variable so that I have these numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice I don't have an end line, and then I can print out the class. Now let's shift this up and make a for each loop. Now remember, we call it a for each loop, but it actually is still using the keyword for. Now what I do is I create a new variable, so I'm going to just call that class. And I'm going to say, oops, I can't call it class because that's a keyword. I'm going to just, in classes, we'll call it my class. Okay, and when I do that, I can now print this out. Now I no longer have access to this index value, and so I can't use that. And so I'm going to have to print my schedule without that value now. And I can just say print my class. And if I go ahead and run this, you'll see I get the same thing. I just no longer have the numbers next to them because I don't have access to that value. So again, the advantage to this is it's a nice clean piece of code. It looks pretty straightforward. The disadvantage is I don't have that loop variable to use in my process. So go ahead and play with this on your own.